So the new season of King of the Hill is out, and I have to admit that despite the initial hype and the positive reviews, I was a little apprehensive going into this. Recent revivals, reboots, and revisitings of existing IPs have been extraordinarily hit or miss, and King of the Hill is one of my favorite shows of all time. I'm pretty sure that with the amount that I play this show in the background, I've seen every episode like 10 times. It's kind of ridiculous. And I'm happy to say that this new season shows a lot of potential. It's not up to the level of some of the classic episodes from the first 6 seasons, but it's definitely better than most of what we got from seasons 12 and 13. I've got a list here of some of my highlight moments from the new season, and while I'm going to do my best to avoid dropping major spoilers, there are going to be some minor ones. So if that bothers you, it might be a good idea to come back after you've watched the new season. You've been warned. Episode 1 is a pretty fun reintroduction to the core cast, even if there were a few jokes that made my eyes roll. I do love Peggy using the line about female presenting. It's classic Peggy trying to stay in touch with current trends, but not really fully understanding the societal meaning. I'm not gonna lie, for the first 20-ish minutes of this episode, I wasn't really sold on this revival, but the final scene with Hank and Peggy outside of Megalomart buying cookies from the Girl Scouts really helped me feel at ease. It shows that yes, things are changing in our society, and some of these changes might feel arbitrary, but also there's an acceptance that some of these changes aren't necessarily for you, and sometimes it can be a good thing. It also shows the kindness that we're capable of showing to each other, and that most of us are just people navigating this constantly changing world together and doing the best that we can with it. Episode 2 was a fun look at how alike Hank and Bobby are despite so much about them being different, and I understand where both were coming from. Brewing beer together could absolutely become a fun pastime for the two of them, but it makes sense that Hank would end up making a more boring traditional American beer while Bobby would want to focus on brewing one with different flavors that could take his reputation and by extension his restaurant to a new level. Hank had a problem in the original series with his competitive streak, and it's interesting to see that manifest in Bobby even if it isn't tied to athletics. Also, Joseph and Dale spying on the judges was amazing. The way Joseph hides from being spotted made me laugh out loud, and this man is Dale Gribble's son. It's completely uncanny. I absolutely love it. Episode 3 was where basically all of my apprehension completely vanished. This episode is so good, and surprisingly the standout here for me is Chain. He has so many good lines, even if he is an insufferable douchebag. I also really appreciate Hank coming around on Bobby's food and the fact that he cooks with charcoal. Hank has always been stubborn and slow to accept new things, but he's also always insisted on doing things the right way. It makes sense for him to be hurt, but it also makes sense for him to eventually understand that this method is the right way to cook for Bobby's particular style of cooking. I also really enjoyed the scenes at the George Bush Museum. Dale having a Substack account is fucking hilarious, and Hank interacting with the conspiracy theorists is great. I really appreciate that the show is constantly drip feeding us information about how Hank feels about contemporary politics without throwing it directly in our face. Like when he refutes the Obama birther conspiracy theorist, but then following up with the statement that Obama being from Hawaii is enough reason to not vote for him. It's classic Hank, and it's great. There's also a really fun conversation in this episode where Emilio, Bobby's sous chef, Bobby, and Joseph are talking about Speedy Gonzalez and Mel Blanc, and as somebody who works in hospitality and has conversations like this every day, it felt like a really nice touch. Episode 4 is one of the weaker ones for me. It was fine, but I really wish we'd gotten more Boomhauer this season. I feel like Bill and Dale each get episodes where they get their moments to shine, but it felt like Boomhauer was sidelined in his own episode. I know that this was ultimately an episode about Hank seeking fulfillment after retirement and learning how to open up to people, but I still would have liked to see more of Boomhauer. There's a conversation in this episode where Bobby and Connie are talking about Chain, and the way Bobby talks about him makes me curious as to how these two got into business together in the first place. It's kind of a shame this wasn't expanded on at all this season, but I'd like to see that as a plot point in the future. In episode 5, it's revealed that Hank secretly became a soccer fan while he was in Saudi Arabia, and it's hilarious and I love it. That's not really a spoiler because it's revealed in the first 2 minutes of the episode, and the plot involves more than that, so don't worry. The B plot of this episode with Bobby buying a car and then getting saddled with a horse, pun intended, is complete gold. Joseph in this episode also has some really amazing one-liners, and there's a really sweet moment with him and John Redcorn towards the end that I liked a lot. I will say that Dale's unhinged nature has gotten a lot more out of hand without Hank around to rein him in, but I think that it's a natural progression from the character we saw in the original series, especially with everything that's happened in society since then. It's just a little jarring, to be honest. I also love the background details in this show. Just pay attention to the background in the scenes that take place in Dale's basement, and and you'll see what I mean. Episode 6 was another weak episode for me, and a little weird. I feel like Bill's constant lying in order to get approval from strangers has been old for a long time, but on the other hand, he hasn't left his house in 5 years, and at the very least, he's making steps to improve his life again now that Hank and Peggy are back. It was still really weird though, and honestly, it kinda left a sour taste in my mouth. Episode 7 was a real standout for me though, and honestly, the last few episodes of this season are all really good. There are a lot of moments this season that show us how much Hank and Bobby have come to understand each other despite their differences, and while they still struggle to bond with each other, both of them are still making an effort, and that's really sweet. This episode's B-plot also has Dale and Peggy paired up with each other, which I always love, because things get preposterously out of hand with these two. They literally tried faking their deaths to escape an MLM in season 11. It isn't quite at that level, but it's still pretty insane. I think episode 8 is my favorite episode of the entire season. The conversations and interactions between all of the characters are amazing, but most specifically, conversations between Bobby and Connie, Joseph and Bobby, Connie and Peggy, and a quiet moment between the guys and Con at the end of the episode are beautiful moments that show that the writers understand who these characters are and what makes them special, and that gives me faith for future seasons. And like I said before, I'm really loving all the grown-up kids this season and seeing Connie, Joseph, and Bobby interact with each other as adults, and the writers being able to keep their core character traits while also showing how they've grown is beautiful. However, I'm really not sold on Ronnie Chang as Con.
Ha ha ha! Missed again, Hank Hill. Hey, I know why you don't want to knock down the pins. It's because they're rednecks, just like you.
And don't get me wrong, I don't mind them recasting, especially since they still kept Toby Huss on board, playing a character with significantly more screen time after the passing of Dale's original voice actor, Johnny Hardwick. It just doesn't sound like Chang is trying that hard to sound like Con. Although, in my opinion, he still isn't as drawing to me as Kenneth Cho as Ted Wasanasong, who just doesn't seem like he even bothered to listen to the original character's voice.
Super nice.
And speaking of voices, Toby Huss fully takes over for Johnny Hardwick beginning in episode 7. And as much as I hate to say it, I actually prefer his voice over Hardwick here. Don't get me wrong, Hardwick provided an amazing performance in the first 13 seasons of the show, but listening to him for the first part of this season made me feel the way I do when I hear Julie Kavner in a modern episode of The Simpsons.
Oh, Bart, it was perfect.
I really liked what the show was going for in episode 8, but I feel like this criticism was kind of on the nose. I did love Hank calling out all the Manosphere losers in that support group though, and I appreciate that he was able to get them all on his side by the end. It gives me hope that some of these young men being sucked into these circles online aren't too far gone and just need someone to try and reason with them and point out the hypocrisy in what these Manosphere influencers are telling them. The flashback to Cotton that Hank experiences while GH is laying into him really shows the level of toxicity that run in these circles too, and I really like that we got a look at GH in this season at all. Also, seeing Junichiro again was an interesting touch. I just wish that we had gotten more time for characters like Hank and GH to interact with each other, and that kind of is a smaller version of a bigger problem I have with this season. It's half the length of the older seasons of King of the Hill, and while I feel like it was cool to be able to check in on everyone and get a glimpse of how a lot of these characters are doing, the season feels so interested in fitting everyone in an attempt to hold our attention that everything feels a little bit rushed. I'm hoping that future seasons don't have this issue now that they don't have to worry about whether or not people will tune in, but that remains to be seen. Episode 9 cements Pamela Alden as Peggy as a standout this season. The way she pronounces Saudi Arabia, the way that she's still way too confident in herself and her own abilities, and the way that she's become even more unhinged as she's gotten older are all really fun to watch. Her moment with Bobby at the end of the episode is also very sweet, and it's really great to see that as an adult, he's still very close with both of his parents. It makes me think of that weird fan art comic that was going around a couple years ago where like Chris Griffin and Bart Simpson are in a couples counseling meeting and their therapist turns out to be Bobby. It's like, yeah, man, you were right. There's also a callback in this episode to Bobby Goes Nuts that was really funny.
That's my purse. I don't know you.
I'm not gonna lie, F-bombs are a little weird to hear in a show like King of the Hill, but if anyone's going to drop them, I feel like it makes sense for Peggy, who, of the main cast, is the only one who's dropping them. And finally, we get to episode 10. This episode's A-plot was kind of weak for me. I feel like we didn't get a lot of moments of the core gang of Hank, Dale, Bill, and Boomhauer getting any shenanigans this season, and I really would have liked to see more of that. I do like that we got to see some of the characters that we haven't had the chance to check up on yet, and that they were being classic versions of themselves. But all in all, it wasn't this season's strongest. I do love the B-plot of Bobby and Connie navigating the challenges of trying to reconnect with someone from your childhood. Obviously, two people aren't going to be the same as they were when they were kids, but the writers are doing a good job of showing that these are minor bumps in the road more than anything. The last thing I want to talk about is that I really wanted to try to get past it, but I'm having a hard time with the animation. A lot of it looks fine, and some scenes even look pretty good, but there are moments here that look like a college humor video from 2011, and I hate it. I know that we're never going to get back to the classic look of the earlier seasons, but even once the show switched to digital animation in the later seasons, it never looked this bad. I'm hoping this is something that might improve more down the road, but as long as the character writing continues to be as strong as it is toward the end of this season, I'll be able to put up with it. So all in all, while the new season of King of the Hill has its fair share of problems, it also shows an incredible amount of potential, and I'm excited for what the writers have in store for the future. And if you're a fan of the original show and haven't had a chance to check it out yet, I highly recommend it. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I really needed this video because right now I'm working on another project involving Ari Aster's films, and as much as I love those, this was a breath of fresh air that didn't make me feel sad. So that was nice. Be sure to subscribe so that you see more of my content in the future, and I will see you guys in the next one.